lovely to see you all. I think before we get underway, if you could just briefly introduce yourselves and just give us a short synopsis of your organisation and your role within it, so you can put it all in context. Shall we start with you, Adrian?
Yeah, sure. I'm Adrian Merker, and I've been with CH now for about 6 years or so. Yeah, it feels like a long time. I started off, CH is a sort of a fairly large US headquartered global company. We're present in around 50 countries worldwide. We turn over revenue-wise about 5 billion a year, and we've got about 20,000 employees worldwide. That's where we are today. Many of you may be speculating what happens in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll answer that question in 2 weeks' time, so don't ask me because I don't genuinely know, but we will become Jacobs. CH is, I guess, what a program delivery company. We support clients deliver large-scale programs. We also do quite a lot of technical work, engineering work as well, and we also do a lot of strategic consultancy work as well. So, sort of programs we've been involved in. Many of you know Baraka. CH was a leading light in the start-up of the Baraka project back in 2009. And just to sort of point out, Baraka's getting close to operations now. Fuel's on site, though, waiting to load it. So it's probably looking right now as one of the most successful nuclear programs for a long time. We're also involved in lots of programs in the UK. We always sort of remind people we were involved in the Olympics a little bit, in fact quite a lot, which was delivered delivered on time and ready for the Olympics. But we're also involved in things like Crossrail, Thames Tideway, and we're also involved in HS2 as well. So we're quite familiar with delivering large-scale programs in the UK. And nuclear programs. We do a lot of decommission as well and have a presence up at Doomray, which we're in the joint venture up there. So that's CH, and just to sort of reflect a little bit on what can other industries reflect. Well, I joined the nuclear industry probably about 10 years ago now, but my background is defence, aerospace and infrastructure, so I have quite a wide, diverse portfolio of stuff which I keep trying to bring into the nuclear industry, and I'm not giving up yet.
Excellent. Well, we will be asking you to leverage all of that in the discussion. Chris?
I'm Chris Ball. I'm currently the Managing Director of the UK and Europe region for the energy business in Atkins, and that's a role I'll hold for the 21 days. So I have got business cards to give away if anyone's interested. But as many of you will know, Atkins is 20,000 people across a number of sectors, infrastructure, and obviously work with CH not only in the energy sector, but also in the broader infrastructure sector and very closely on the Olympics, actually. More importantly for Atkins is we're about 6 months ahead of where CH are, in that we were bought 6 months ago by SNC-Lavalin of Canada. We're currently going through an integration, and as of the 1st of January, what that integration will see is a combined nuclear business between the legacy SNC-Lavalin and the legacy Atkins. And that'll be about a 600-700 million sterling turnover business, broadly split 3 ways between a technology owner in a CANDO technology and, of course, many spin-offs from that technology, a nuclear decommissioning tier 1 capability that we have through the Energy Solutions acquisition that Atkins did probably about 18 months ago, largely based out of the US, working on DOE sites, and then a nuclear services business. So within that structure, my role will be the managing director, or what other title I might have coming from the other side of the pond, for the UK, Europe and Middle East region as well. So they'll be in place from the 1st of January. And I think certainly the challenge for us as a business, with certainly 3 distinct business models that are operating within the nuclear sector, is to make sure we make the most of the business going forward.
Great, thank you. John?
Good morning, everybody. My name is John Prothero. I'm from BAM Nuttall. As I said, I've been with the company 28 years. I've only just recently hung up my wellies and moved indoors to look after the BAM Nuttall, and with Kier as the JV's involvement with the nuclear new build programme. BAM is part of the Dutch group. We're present turnover of something in the region of £7 billion across Europe. Within the nuclear market, we've been heavily involved with Hinkley, but also with AWE in the past. and recognise that this is a key market for us, which we've invested heavily into, and recognise that it's a key part of our business strategy. So my primary role is to see us through that process of getting a share of that market. So, yeah, that's me.
Well, we're going to open up to the audience pretty soon, so get your question caps on, as it were. We'll be having the microphone going around, but you can, of course, also use the question forum. But I'm thinking, before we open it up, given that you all have such extensive energy and infrastructure backgrounds, set the scene for us. What's the most important thing you think that you've learnt along the way in these journeys?
Ooh.
Just a small, narrow one to open with.
I can start if you like. I remember when I joined the industry. I mean, I've been in the nuclear industry for 20 or something years. And when I joined the industries, I think emails were just hitting the scene. It was cool to have a mobile phone that wasn't the size of the brick. And here I am 20 odd years later, where emails are an outdated form of communication. Judging from what my kids want for Christmas, mobile phones the size of a brick are back on vogue again. So put all that together and say, you know, it's a market of huge change. And as I look what we have gone through as, and I'll talk in Atkins parlance here, what we as Atkins have gone through over the last 20 years. First of all, we saw a change in the market. We're an engineer, we're a designer. We saw a change in the market, a lot of offshoring taking place to India, new competitors emerging from new far-flung places. And I think, like many companies, at first, we went into defensive mode about that. And it was only after a while that you realise we're not going to be able to defend against this. Companies playing by different rules, and we have to play this game. And like many other companies out there, we now have around, sort of 2,000, 3,000 people based out of India working for projects all around the world. We're no different to many companies out there, and that was a huge change that we had to go through as an organisation, cultural, to really start moving that work out there. And the reality of life is, through the sort of market crashes of 2007, 2008, that provided huge advantage to fundamentally stay in business through very austere times. So you look at that change that's taking place. You now look at the word digital is so much overused, but I'm going to use it. But the digital revolution that's taking place, how that's going to affect our business. And in an engineering consultancy, it's an engineering design house, your business is based fundamentally around the number of people you employ. That link is going to go completely. It becomes far more IT based, about computer systems, automated design, doing a lot of the work for you. So how do we react to that? And we want to be the people doing the disruption rather than being the disrupted in all of this. And I'm sure many companies are on the front foot in the same way. So for me, the biggest lesson is change is a constant. That's the one thing you can guarantee, and actually embracing it and driving forward is what's going to make actually this industry a huge success.
We'll definitely come back to the digital disruption point. John, any thoughts?
I think that from the civil construction side of things, there's been such a lot of talk already in the talks this morning about productivity, and certainly the focus on that productivity is going to be during the construction phase. The need to change our approach to nuclear is different. Nuclear is far more complicated than the vast majority of our industries. We have very little experience, if we're brutally honest, of nuclear new build in the UK. The experience is the experience pool is small. So we really have to do something very different, and that starts, I think, with the whole process of the involvement of the whole supply chain. There's the desire to quite often silo activities because there are very many thousands of different activities that are needed to be completed to deliver a program. And it is different from our other major works, but I think the need to have a complete team that has a multiple of disciplines to enable the efficiency and the productivity to be delivered during the construction phase is critical. And I think we need to look overseas for some of the experience. I know that with Hitachi in Japan, they've constructed their reactor in 4 years, which is, I think the reality is that we're quite a long way from being able to achieve that kind of performance criteria at the moment. So they're doing something very different. They're having ECI is a well-used phrase, but an ECI phase of something like 6 or 7 years. And that is delivering productivity. there's obviously massive investment needed to achieve that pre-construction investment. But that's personally where I think that we really need to look very carefully at.
Adrian.
I think, picking on what Chris was saying, really change, it's inevitability, and if you don't change with it, you get left behind. I think that's really quite clear. And of course, business and organisations need to adapt and change all the time, but it does have quite a lot of personal effects on a lot of people. And so I'm probably going to appeal to the younger people in the room here, because some of us are towards the end of our career, and perhaps we should tell them a little bit more about what happens to them. And the reality is that actually things will happen, things will change, but there are things that called opportunities that will continuously evolve, and it's really important to recognise those opportunities, seize those opportunities, and sort of take them on in strong ways. And the reason I say that, sometimes you're given something and it doesn't feel quite the right thing to do. It doesn't really suit what you want to do, but actually when you sit down and think about it, you will actually find there's a lot of things you can do with it. And I've seen that a lot in my career and driven change into the organisation. And one of them was, in particular, in the aerospace industry, everybody liked building new aeroplanes. Nobody liked doing support to them. Well, funnily enough, we don't build a lot of new aeroplanes now. We do a hell of a lot of support for them. And some friends of mine went into the whole area of support and felt it was all a bit of spare parts and a bit of this and a bit of that. Well, actually, they re-changed the whole service-based delivery of support in the aerospace world to this very different to where it was 20 years ago. So, recognise those opportunities and recognise the opportunities that are given to you, and see what you can do to make a difference. And I think probably, and recognising the world will change around with you. If I ever sat here in my early days and said I'd be sitting here on a stage talking about nuclear, I would have said, no way. I would never have expected it. But I've been given the opportunity to do that, and I relish that.
Well, it's great to see lots of young faces in the audience. We've had someone posting on the forum as nuclear graduate, so presumably a new generation. James Faraday asks, there's a lot we can take from non-nuclear large-scale project successes. What can we as the nuclear industry do to encourage better cross-sector learning and overcome the perceived barriers of non-nuclear organisations joining the supply chain? Chris, do you want to come back on that?
Not really, no.
You're nodding vigorously.
I mean, I've worked in the industry, I say, for a number of years. And I remember originally working at AWE, and we designed quite a number of the buildings down at AWE as part of the infrastructure redevelopment. And going back to about 2002, when you come down to this principle of SQEP, suitably qualified and experienced people, it was all the time, it was being assessed on an individual level, and it was looking at experience in the nuclear arena. Whereas actually, you looked at a lot of these facilities, you were talking of blast containment, seismic containment, you were talking about big civil construction. And yes, you need the nuclear capability, but it actually needed to be in a team sense. And actually, a lot of the skills that you were looking for were big civil infrastructure capability. And the important thing there is we managed to work with the client quite well to sort of move the thinking towards that big civil infrastructure capability. And actually, that's truly the skills that were needed. And that's the principle of blended teams. And that's something I think we're seeing come more and more into the industry. And it's got to be at the centre of the new build programme that we're seeing as well.
Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, in specific reference to how do you do this? Well, you go and get involved in other industries and see what they're doing. How do you do that if you're in the nuclear industry? Well, there are actually quite a lot of societies out there, a lot of institutions, the IMECs, there's the Royal Aeronautical Society, there's all sorts of institutes that are very complementary to what the NI do. And they're doing some fantastic things out there, and it's get involved and get to support these institutions and learn from them, because the only people that are going to make a difference are the people in the industry. And so you need to go out there and trawl. I think it's the modern expression. Is that right? Have I got that right? Get out there and go and look and see what they're doing, and see how some of these industries have transformed themselves from where they were 20 years ago to where they are today. Because the nuclear industry has got to go through, I think, some of that transformation, and we've got to stop thinking about everything's nuclear. Just like Chris says, actually, there's a lot of stuff that is should be very clearly nuclear, and there's no doubt about that, but there's a lot of other stuff. And the construction industry has gone through several changes through the various reports, and I chair the Nuclear Focus Group for Construction Excellence. My whole objective is to try and bring best practice into the nuclear industry, and I just really would love to see more people get involved, support that type of organisation, because that's where you get your cross-learning from. So we're currently working on the productivity issue that's become a big flavour today. So we're trying to say, well, you know, what does that really mean? Well, does anybody think about productivity in a nuclear construction project? Actually, is there a productivity director in the room anywhere? I suspected so, but if you were sitting here talking about a factory today, there would be productivity director would be one of the key senior directors there on that, driving productivity into it. So that's what Construction Excellence is trying to do, bring that cross-learning. So get out there, find out, bring it. It's up to us to do that, to bring that together and bring that into the industry. And you know, always take no as a bit of a reluctance. Why are you saying no? Get behind why the no. Okay, because no's often about some perception. The system doesn't allow me to. Show me where the system doesn't allow that. Challenge those things, because I think it's all, some of it's imaginary and made up. So go out there, learn and challenge what you got.
I think building on what Adrian's saying is also we need to look outside of our industry as well, and that's our major projects and infrastructure projects. There's a huge amount of experience and knowledge that's been gained from them, but you know, some of the work that AMRC are doing and the use of almost futuristic concepts of bringing them into our industry, but we need to almost change the solution. We don't use that technology to develop the solution that's been developed. We need to be thinking about how that technology is going to be used right from the initial concept. And it's a really brave new world, and the use of the likes of virtual reality, augmented reality in productivity. You know, at present, I think generally an awful lot of it is used as almost a sales tool to be able to show what a lovely project or whatever we're going to build. But there is nothing greater than actually being able to build it completely virtually, and if you build anything the second time, you know, you're immediately into significant double figures improvement in productivity. But that requires significant investment at the front end to be able to achieve those type of achievements. And you know, that's the challenge, in that so often we're driven by the financial world of, a lot of the, in the old days we'd have 4 weeks to tender and we'd turn up with our wellies and say, what are we going to build today? It's not exactly, you're not going to generate a great deal of productivity through that process. You know, so.
You've touched on the fact that the one constant that can be depended upon is change, but a couple of questions have come in that are connected, so I'll take them both at once. On the theme of change, asks someone anonymous, is the industry changing fast enough and doing exciting enough things to get young people interested in a nuclear career rather than one in aerospace or electric cars, renewables, etc.? HPC took 10 years before construction started. What can we learn from other sectors? And Jonathan Bew, nuclear graduate, is asking, the nuclear industry is traditionally slow to adopt new practices. What are the barriers to trying new approaches that have been proved elsewhere? Who would like to come back on that first?
Well, I do think that is every part of that question is true, and it is a challenge, because so often when you're confronted with proposing a methodology or any form of proposal, the first question is, where has it been done before, and can you prove that this works? Which is the nature of the very conservative manner of the nuclear market. So there is, quite rightly, a great deal of conservatism within things, but you know, it still needs to be challenged, because it's not generating a very efficient product at this stage.
Adrian?
I think John's touched on it. It's for me, the key thing is behavioural. It is a very prudent decision-making industry for obvious reasons. And over the years, that has driven a slow reaction to change. And we have to accelerate as an industry. And if we don't, we're dead. As simple as that. I'm pretty sure I speak with everyone in this room that we want to ensure the long-term success of the nuclear industry. And if I look at the airline industry, that was another prudent decision-making industry of 20 years ago, half those companies are now out of business. They saw the likes of Southwest Airlines or an EasyJet, who obviously emulated the model, come with this no-frills approach. But it actually wasn't just no frills. It wasn't just about skipping a meal. It wasn't just about no seats reserved. It was about looking at every single aspect of the business model, whether it's the fleet approach to aircraft and maintenance, whether it's the landing slots, whether it's the turnaround time. All of this was looked at to drive cost out of that business. And as an industry in the nuclear sector, we face our equivalent of the low-cost airline model in offshore wind. I mean, it's very easy to look at offshore wind and set it aside saying it's different, it's only there when the wind blows. But the reality is, 3 months ago, there was a CFD placed for around 3 gigawatts of power, averaging £64 a megawatt hour. You throw battery backup onto that, you could argue that might take it up to the high £60 per megawatt hour. I think many utilities would argue that enables them to play the market in a different way and actually do away with CFDs completely. So we have a big competitive threat there. Now, nuclear is needed. We need big base load in the background. But certainly what I've seen, and Adrian and John and I were talking about this before, is over the last couple of years, is a change from the anti-nukes, moving away from this sort of sensationalism around the risk associated with nuclear and actually starting to focus more on the cost of nuclear. And as an industry, we need to respond to that and do a root and branch review, call it what you will, of every single aspect of our industry to drive cost out and become more efficient. And whether that's the cost of finance, whether it's the productivity that John spoke about, whether it's the technology as well, and driving cost out through the technology we select. But we need to adapt. We need to adapt quickly there.
My take, and I lived through the aerospace challenge, and I saw how the airlines drove what they wanted from their aircraft, and how they weren't thinking about a bit of inflation here, a bit of inflation there. They actually wanted a 5 to 10% cost reduction on an aircraft year on year, and that drove all sorts of behaviours right down through the supply chain. So. To get change, you need a burning platform. Does anybody in here do not think we've got a burning platform for change? Just put your hands up if you... Okay, how many think we've got a good productivity in our industry? How many people think we got some stuff that might just be a little bit dangerous? We got burning platforms. Now you've got to translate that into a burning platform and a concept for change. And I think my experience from the aerospace industry was once change starts to get a grip, it will start to happen. And I think now I'm starting to see change. I think the reality pills of what we thought was true is no longer true. It's starting to be realised. So I think we're starting to see change come through. But walk out this room and just say to yourselves and go into your organisations and just say, what are the burning platforms that we need to address? Because if you don't get the burning platforms sorted out, you don't get those in your mind, don't see productivity as a big challenge. Does anybody know how productive we are in the nuclear industry here today? Okay, I've heard numbers of where times 3 to times 10 above estimated original prices. That's what I'm hearing, okay? And I'd like to get to the bottom of whether that's true. That is a massive issue. And, if we're going to get this industry going, we need investment. Investors need to be confident. We've got to get the productivity sorted out. We've got to be predictable. We've got to be delivering on time to cost and all those sort of things. So if that's not a burning platform to get change going, wherever that might come from, and examine every angle, as Chris was saying, this is not a simple thing. You've got to go right down into the details, look at every single aspect of what you're doing to deliver, and find better ways of doing it. Stop wasting money.
So what role can technology play in that? You've talked about the digital revolution. Where do you think technology will intersect with some of those problems?
I think, I know I touched on it before with the augmented reality. That has a huge potential to the whole concept within the construction side of things, to be able to actually take a group of a team into a room and say, this is what you're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it today, to have the time within it to improve it, because they are the experts at putting projectors or whatever onto the roof, and to be able to have that timescale, so that when it improves significant productivity, significant improvements in health and safety as well, because you're having those unplanned events are being removed from the equation. So innovation is so often is a step change, but there is incremental change, I should say. But this is it does provide us with an opportunity for really significant step changes in improvement in productivity.
And how soon are we at the point where that kind of technology will be commonplace and can be really useful, rather than just what might appear on the surface to be a VR or an AR gimmick?
But it's there. It can be done, and it is it is perfectly. I think it's significant. It's the amount of time that's allocated, because it does take a significant amount of investment before you move to the construction phase. You need to have a model that's completed. You need to have your design fully completed. So it's a change in approach. I think pick up Adrian's point. I know I was with a meeting in Rolls-Royce, and they made a comment that their first jet engine that went into production, it took them 365 days to manufacture an engine. They can now do it in 24 hours. And the sort of subtext to us is, how long does it take you to build a structure? We're probably on 364 days or something. Maybe that's a bit crude, but it's they've introduced step changes into their productivity, and we need to learn from that as well.
I think the technology is there, I absolutely agree. If I look at a lot of the work we're doing down at Hinckley at the moment, where we are designing in 3D, so that's enabling a better design. It's enabling better clash detection. It's enabling algorithms to be written that look at the connection details and looking at anything outside of standards. So undertaking tasks that perhaps the human brain, high volume, repeatable tasks that the human brain is never great at. It's not designed for that. But actually, computer algorithms are brilliant at it, so it's improving the design. It's then improving the interface between the sort of constructor and the designer as well. It gives a common platform of data that guys can talk through that aids collaboration. And actually, it aids the method statements, the ability to break down a 3D model. So steel fixers might be able to look at their method statement, their sequencing of steel erection as well. And then actually the 3D visualization, you go to Hinckley, you've got steel fixers out there with the iPads looking at things in 3D. So I think you throw all that together, it's hugely advantageous. But is it the industry norm yet? No. Do we always get asked to design in 3D? No, 2D. So actually we need to move the industry, all of us move the industry towards that point where it becomes the default option.
I do think the nuclear has a huge potential to drag the rest of the industry with it as well.
Yeah.
I think my sort of thoughts on this were, again, I sort of reflecting on construction excellence a little bit. We did a study tour to Japan back in 2011 and got thrown in a little bit of an earthquake while we were there. So it was, for some of us who are in the room, and I know there are some people, we shared a moment together, you might say.
Emotional.
Indeed. But one of the things that, we're talking about, Chris talked about 3D, they're talking about 7D down there already. They're doing 7D modelling. I can't remember what all the D stand for, but there was a lot of them, and I used to remember them, but I've forgotten now. I think I can get about past 5 at the moment. So yes, it's definitely there. It's definitely available. Some of the things it enables that we don't really do today is integrating design. So we normally have a civil design, a mechanical design, electrical design. Well, in Japan they have integrated designs now, so they do it all together. So what does it mean? Well, for me, the massive gains in productivity are potentially there, and the biggest one is about the ability to rehearse construction.